Today, you're in for a real treat with Laura Thompson. She shares with us how she's lived an alcohol free life for the past 5 years. Prior to that, she drank daily for 10 years. She's not a licensed counselor or therapist, but she shares her real life experience to help people overcome and just be released from addiction in their life. She is a local Colorado Springs Orange Theory member. She's been married for 15 years to her husband, and together they have 4 kids. She works for a large local dental office where she manages and does human resources. She has the most beautiful voice that she leads worship with and has done countless weddings and funerals. You're going to love today's guest. Welcome, Laura. I've got a question for you. Who's the person you're being? Are you satisfied? It's okay. This is a judge-free zone, and it's exactly why I started the show. Welcome to Be the Person, a podcast for the brave and the curious who are ready to explore who they are fully created to be. I'm your host, Annie Randall, the adventurous one leading this investigative journey of transformation. By delving into topics and asking unexpected questions, we will discover the keys for unlocking our true potential and being our best selves today. You may be surprised by what you find when you let go of fear in order to discover the answers of becoming the person you were made to be. Welcome to Be the Person podcast. I'm really excited to have one of my friends and one of our Orange Theory members, Laura, here with me today. Good morning, Laura.
Good morning. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm super excited to have this conversation because I know you add so much value to our audience and you have such an amazing story that I can't wait for us to jump in and share. But tell us a little bit about you before we do that and where you are today and how you got there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name's Laura, and I'm a pastor's kid from Omaha, Nebraska. Go Cornhuskers! So I still cheer for the Big Red, even though we've really had a rough couple of seasons for the last 10 or 15 years. But we're going to come back one of these years. I just know it. So anyway, I'm from Nebraska. But moved here when I was 14 years old with my family and have just loved being in Colorado ever since. Let's see. I now am in human resources and management for a very large dental office here in town. And so I really enjoy that, love being a part of people's lives in that human resources capacity. Really enjoy that. I am married to the best guy in the whole wide world. And we have 4 children between us. I don't love the term his, hers, and ours, but in fact, that is what we have. My husband had 2 kids from his first marriage. I had a daughter before I met him, and then together we had one more. So I am the mom of 4 kids, and kind of have been able to experience the stepmom dynamic and the blended family dynamic, and been kind of done all of that. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey. Um, I'm a former worship leader. Led worship in a couple of different churches here in town and have loved that, just in a different season of my life now. But yeah, those are just some little tidbits about me, Annie.
I love that.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things about Orange Theory is really hearing people's stories because they're stories that I'm always amazed that I don't expect to hear. And that happened with the two of us when we were talking in the lobby about a month ago. You started sharing your story, which I just love that you did. And I was blown away because it's a story I wouldn't expect. And I think that, we often say that don't judge a book by its cover, but I think we're all carrying things and have stories that nobody would expect. And I would just love if you would share with the audience a little bit about what you shared with me that day in the lobby.
Yeah, I would be happy to. And that was such an interesting experience in the lobby that day, because I really did just sort of word vomit all over you. I don't even know why or how I felt the need. We were standing there before class, and it just sort of came up out of me. So thank you for being such a lovely listener and just allowing me to share, because apparently it was on my heart that day. And so yes, let me share just a little bit of my story. I will answer your questions. So, um, being a pastor's kid, as I'm sure everyone can imagine, I have the most incredible parents in the whole wide world. Let me just start there. The most loving, kind, compassionate, caring, merciful, marvelous people on the planet. But when you are a pastor's kid, sometimes it becomes very apparent that it's not okay to be not okay. And I'm sure that that experience is not exclusive to kids who grow up in ministries. I think all of us have learned pretty early on that the more we present as being great and having it all together and having everything wonderful, the better life can go for us or the better we feel. And so, from a very early age, I learned that I needed to go ahead and figure out how to take care of myself emotionally, because I didn't want to burden anybody else with it. And it kind of wasn't okay to have a moment. So, anyways. Um, I started doing that from a very young age with food. And so for almost all of my growing up years, food was my drug of choice. I just, you have a bad day, you have some ice cream about it, and you move on. And so that's what I did with myself. And that's kind of how I coped with just the regular things that life throws at us all. I coped with those things with food. I had my daughter when I was 23 years old in 2003 and realized pretty quickly after that that I needed to do something about my health because I wanted to be around. At that point, I really had a reason to try to lose some weight, get healthy, because I had a little girl who was depending on me. The person that I had her with did not stick around, and so it was going to be me and her, and my wonderful parents who gave a ton of support. But I knew that I needed to be around for my kids. So what I decided to do was have gastric bypass surgery, which was a wonderful thing in my life personally. I also during that season of time met my husband, who is like I said, the most incredible human being in the whole wide world. But I did. I had topped the scales at 305 pounds and just knew that I needed to do something. So I had gastric bypass surgery, which was amazing. Lost a ton of weight, but unfortunately did not learn any new coping skills. So didn't learn any new coping skills about how to deal with my feelings, my emotions, the challenges of life that would come my way. And also right around that time, have gastric bypass surgery. I have a 3-year-old daughter, get married to the love of my life. Praise God, so happy that this happened. Um, but instant family, right? We move in together, my husband and I. He has his 2 kids. I have my one. We move into a very small house together and start the process of living as a blended family. And the pressure of that was a lot. And it's interesting, in my opinion, how we can be both blissfully happy and terrified at the same time. And so I was having all of these big feelings and emotions of the blending of the families and getting the girls together and learning how to blend that family together and just the new dynamics of life. And I had no idea how to handle it. I could no longer have some ice cream about it because my stomach was about this big. And so I started drinking. Um, I do have to say also at this moment in time that I come from a long line of addicts. My family has always kind of lived really large. And so everyone in my family's been dependent, usually in one way or another, on substances. And so I sort of came by that naturally. Not to blame anyone else, but it's just I think it's important to acknowledge that that can be part of the dynamic where these things come in. So I started drinking. I made some rules for myself pretty early on that I kept for the most part. I tried not to drink when my kids were awake. So it would just be me getting through to bedtime until I could start drinking. But I started drinking every night and it just quickly became this thing where I did it once or twice thinking, "Oh, it's been a hard day. Mommy needs wine." I would just kind of be this sporadic thing to start becoming this everyday thing where I would start to feel panicked. if I didn't have enough in the house, and starting to have to try to invent reasons to leave the house so that I could make sure that I could get to the liquor store to have enough. Um, and it just sort of spiraled from there. Um, so I was a very functional alcoholic for about 10 years of my life, drinking every night, and that was how I conducted my life. Um, yeah. So, then what ended up happening was, I knew sorry, lots of details here.
No,
Gosh.
you're doing great. You're doing
Okay.
so good.
Sorry about that. So, what ended up happening really, and where this kind of all came to a head, I was fortunate, God bless my incredible husband. Again, the best guy in the world. He made it possible for me to stay home with our kids. Because the other thing that happened after our first year of marriage is that I got pregnant. We were not planning on that at all, but I got pregnant with our youngest daughter, Anastasia, and what a gift to our family she's been. But we added her into our lives, and so it became apparent at that point we had 4 children, and I needed to be able to stay home. We were paying so much in daycare costs; it just made more sense for me to stay home. So that's what I did. So I was able to stay home for 7 years with our kids. It was a wonderful experience. And again, the dichotomy is so interesting, isn't it? Like, we're living our best life and we're also dealing with this secret thing that's
Mm.
that we kind of use on the side to try to get through. Um, so anyway, after my youngest daughter was about in 3rd grade, so this was 2018, my husband and I realized I needed to get a job. We were totally out of money. Kids are expensive. I don't know if anybody out there is aware.
I think we know.
And so it came time for me to get a job again outside the home. And my drinking had really come to a head. I was drinking every single night. I was waking up feeling horrible. I was experiencing brain fog. My liver hurt. I remember that feeling of being like, why do I have this pain? Oh, I bet that's my liver. Um, and so I knew I needed a way out of this drinking life, but I had no idea how to get out because and this will resonate with anyone who's listening now who has ever struggled with or is currently struggling with drinking. You get to a point where you don't want to do it anymore. You are not enjoying yourself. It's no longer fun, but you're doing it because the thought of not doing it is terrifying. The thought of a sober night is terrifying. And so you every morning, what I would do is I would say, I cannot do this anymore. I've got to stop. This has to stop. And I would pray, God, please help me. I don't want to do this anymore. I can't tell you how many bottles of wine I poured down the sink. But by the time the day would go on and the evening would come, I would just start to be like, I have to drink. I have to. There's no way I cannot drink. I would start looking forward to it. I would start making excuses as to why I could do it or should do it. Then I would start looking for ways to get out of the house so that I could go buy some more and bring it back to the house so that I would have what I needed. And I would, once again, them kids would go down, I'd put the kids in bed and be like, "Oh, I did it." And then I would want to reward myself with a glass of wine, which and it's never a glass. Um, and so I knew I needed to get off this ride, but I had no idea how to do it. I had asked my friends and family, "Hey, do you guys think I drink too much? Do you think I have a problem?" Because I knew I had a problem, but I was looking for this outside validation. Does anybody else see what I
Mhm.
see? Does anybody else experience what I'm experiencing? And my family, God bless them, only seeing the best in me and also not seeing what happened after they were all in bed when I would just drink and drink and drink until I passed out. They would say, "No, Laura, you don't have a problem. You're fine. Like you don't drink to excess. You're not driving the kids around drunk. You're not showing up at soccer practice drunk with vodka in your cooler, You're fine." And so I would sort of be like, "Okay, I'm fine. I'm fine. This is normal, right? This is normal." Even though knowing deep down inside it was not normal. But I knew I had to make some sort of change. I was getting a job. I knew I could not go to work feeling how I felt in the mornings. And so I just I cried out to God again and said, I need help and I have no idea how to get it. I did try AA at one point. I went to a meeting. I want to say at this moment that I fully support AA and I'm so grateful for it in the world. I know that it has helped millions of people and it will help millions more. But for a few reasons, it wasn't quite right for me. And so I thought, my God, here I am. I know I have a drinking problem, whether my family thinks I do or not. I know I have to do something. And the only resource that I know of in the universe, which is Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't think I was going to be able to assimilate that into my daily life for reasons. I thought, what am I going to do? And so God, as he does, answered. And what happened was there's an influencer lady that I follow on social media. Her name's Kelsey Humphreys. Go check her out. She's great. Anyway, she posted for the first time ever about being sober. And she shared a link to a website called tiredofthinkingaboutdrinking.com. And I thought, I am tired of thinking about drinking. And so I went to this website. This lady, her name is Belle Robertson. God bless her. If I had any more kids, I'd name a kid after her. Uh, she she sends out free sober support emails and many other things, but she starts with emails. And so I started getting her emails and she talks about a 100-day sober challenge. And I think this is so important for people to understand too. A lot of the reasons that people resist getting sober is because the words like never and forever are terrifying to a drunk. You can't ever have alcohol in. You have to be sober forever. That is an immediate shutdown. Those words would just shut me right down because I would think, how can I do this? But Belle has what she calls a 100-day sober challenge. It's 100 days. You can do anything for 100 days. It's not forever, it's just 100 days. And so, what she suggests is to give yourself some sober time. Eliminate alcohol for 100 days. See how you feel. You want to start drinking again after 100 days, knock yourself out. But what she finds, and certainly what I found, is that by removing alcohol for 100 days, suddenly I realized all the joy that I had been missing, all of the goodness I had been missing. And so from that day to this, I have never looked back. September 10th of 2018 was my first sober day. And so I'm a little over 5 years sober now and just incredibly grateful. So that's my story.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I have about a million questions for you. Because, you mentioned something at the very beginning of first you used food and then you used alcohol, all because you were trying to mask emotion and not deal with what was going on inside of you. How did you? I'm guessing that resonates for a lot of people. For a lot of years, that would have resonated with me until we start to figure out, gosh, these emotions don't go away. I have to deal with them. How did you find out, or how did you start to deal with that?
Such a great question. Um, One of the things that does happen to us the minute we strip away whatever it is we've been using to make ourselves feel better, and you're so right. It can be more than food, it can be more than alcohol. It can be so many different things. When you remove though that thing, then you're left with this like raw emotion and you have absolutely no idea how to deal with it. And so and I'm gonna reference Belle, quite a bit from Tired of Thinking About Drinking just because she really does have the tools that I've used, and I can't take credit for them, these are hers. But some of the things I implemented to help me start to deal with myself, is the first thing that I did is I avoided overwhelm. We often, as people, overwhelm ourselves and there's so much going on in life. There's so many pressures. There's so many things that are demanding of our time and our effort and our energy. And these things can really wear us down. And so one of the things that Bell encourages us to do is to avoid overwhelm, to cut down on the noise, because that allows you to start to process life without needing so much coping skill. A lot of times it's like, well, I had a hard day. I deserve a cookie. I had a hard day. I deserve a glass of wine. Well, how about we start by not having such a hard day and really looking at what you're subjecting yourself to every day that's a stressor. Obviously, there are some things we can't avoid. Got to go to work. Got to live with the spouse we got to deal with them kids we brought into the world, right? So those things don't go away. But do you have to make the cookies for the bake sale? No, you don't. You can buy the cookies for the bake sale. Do you have to work out 6 times a week? No, you really don't. You can work out 3 to 4 times a week. Do you have to be the hostess with the mostest and throw the best party in the whole wide universe? No, you actually don't. And so, cutting down on some of that noise was very clarifying for me. And then I was able to say, "Oh, you know, I think I feel sad about missing out on whatever experience. I think I feel stressed. What can I do to reduce my stress?" And you just sort of start to strip these things away and deal with the thing that comes up and really deal with it, not run away from it, not mask it, not try to put it behind a curtain and make it go away, but really deal with it. For some people, that looks like therapy, and I fully support that. For some people, that looks like getting outside and getting in the wilderness and, enjoying some time in nature, and I fully support that. But trying to cut out that overwhelm and start to really deal with yourself in a healthy way is something that was very helpful for me in those early days, especially.
That's great advice because I think a lot of times too, you're right. Just the noise in our life and that feeling of overwhelm can be so much that we honestly have no idea how we feel because if we're not dealing with something else, our phones can be the easy device to go on to numb. It's always right there. And you can always go see what other people are doing or what your email's doing and never really take a minute to say, like you said, I feel this or I feel that. Jeff and I are hosting the trip of a lifetime next April in Italy. It's at a 5-star resort in Tuscany for the first 4 days. It includes biking, wine tasting, a private cooking class, all organic food. There'll be time for massages and workouts. The next 2 days will be spent exploring Rome with some unique tours. We would love for you to join us. I'll put the link in the show notes for additional information or message me. We hope to see you there. What about like when those things would come up for you and you knew that, you had used food or drinking in the past? And I guess even when you cut out the noise, how did you deal with it when it would come up and you used one of your past mechanisms and now you're saying, you said you didn't go back to drinking. You said, I'm just going to do 100 days at first. But what did you start to use to deal with different things?
Absolutely. I cannot stress the therapeutic power of going to bed early.
Mm.
I know that sounds silly, but often we kind of get on autopilot throughout the day. We do the things we have to do. Sometimes when the quiet comes, which is usually at the end of the day, and things start to sort of crash in on us, sometimes the best thing to do is just go to bed. Just get in your bed and go to sleep. Because I think a lot of times, especially for people who struggle with substance abuse. We want to use that alone time for drinking, or we want to use that downtime for drinking. And so I really, really support going to bed early. The other thing though that really was big for me is I had to start inviting other people in. And I had to go ahead and be vulnerable and say, I am sad. I feel stressed. I had to start letting my husband know what was going on with me. I think something that happened with me pretty early on is I used substances of all sorts to keep people at arm's length and say, I'm good. I've got this. I know how to take care of myself and I don't need you at all. I think people that have a lot of hurt and shame and, other issues, we do that sometimes instead of seeking out. we just start putting walls up and we say, you know what, I've got this. And I even did it to some extent in my relationship with God, who's, I'd had a relationship with him since I was 7 years old, but I was even telling him, I've got this. You just go handle what you need to handle. I'm not sure I can trust you. I'm going to take care of myself. And when I removed the food and then removed the drinking, I had to start saying to my husband, I feel sad about this circumstance. I feel stressed about this circumstance. I am angry. I feel lonely. I had to start really talking to my parents. My parents are incredible. They live 2 miles up the street. I see them a lot. I had to start telling them, "Hey, you guys, I'm feeling this way. When these things happen, I feel a certain way. Can we talk about this circumstance from my childhood and just, process through it?" Again, not because I cannot stress how wonderful they were. But we were in some tough spots in ministry. And so, can we talk about that? Was that as hard for you guys as it was for me? Had to start letting people in. And I had to start letting God back in too. And asking him for help, humbling myself, becoming vulnerable, laying myself bare. And that really was healing because what I learned, and I'm blessed to be surrounded by healthy people, but what I learned is those people actually care about me and they really did wanna help me. I just needed to let them do it. Um, and I know not everybody's so lucky, but I guarantee you, if you look around, there is somebody in your life that is living for your good, that cares about you, that wants to hear from you. Your OTF coaches are amazing if you go to OTF. They would love to listen to you, give you a hug, tell you everything's gonna be okay. And so I think that was a big part of the healing is I just had to really start processing it and letting people in.
It's hard to let those walls come down, especially to the people close to us, I think. When you were drinking and you were going through this, was your husband aware? And what were his thoughts during all of this? And then your transition to let him in and let him help?
Such a great question. My husband happens to be one of the most steady guys you'll ever meet. We call him Steady Eddie because he is the normal to my crazy. He is the steady to my tumultuous. I'm the one with the big personality and I'm super social and gregarious and wild and crazy. And he's just Mr. Steady, which is exactly what I need in my life. And so when I was drinking, he never, ever, ever made me feel bad about this. And I actually asked him to share with me just a little bit before I did this podcast because I did want to hear from him. One of the things he said to me is he said, I don't think you were near as much of a burden as you think that you were when you were drinking. And that was an interesting thing I have not unpacked yet. Um, but he he was steady with me in that time when I was drinking. There was a couple of times where he had to I was blacked out on the floor. He had to help me, get back up and get to bed. So there was a couple of times that something like that would happen that he would have to deal with, but for the most part, he said it wasn't as burdensome as I maybe thought that I was. But when I stopped, and I actually started letting him in, we experienced a greater intimacy than we had ever experienced. And I mean emotional intimacy because I really was for the first time in our marriage, 10 years in, letting him see me and and asking him to shoulder my burdens. I think when people get married a little bit later in life, and I wasn't like ancient, I was 26, but I had been through a lot of life. I had had a child with somebody who did not stick around. I had never had a relationship longer than 9 months. I was just too much for everyone I had ever been in a relationship with. So when I married Craig, I was determined not to be too much. And so I think I went through a lot of wanting to just deaden myself and not burden him with my feelings, not burden him with my emotions. 'Cause I was terrified it would be too much and he would leave me. And so when I stopped deadening myself, stopped dealing with myself on my own and started letting him in, surprisingly, he didn't leave me. And he was actually like, hey, I could help with that. And he enjoyed that dynamic. So it was really a wonderful thing that's actually created so much more health in our relationship since letting it be more of a two-way street. Imagine that.
Yeah. But I can imagine that, especially given the past, that you think I'm too much, he might leave me, that was scary to let anybody in, your husband or anybody else with those walls come down, because vulnerability is scary. You don't know the outcome of how that person's going to react. Did you feel, was it a scary transition for you at first?
Absolutely terrifying. Terrifying. Um, because also I was dealing with shame and regret because I had basically and this to this day is difficult for me to talk about because it is a shameful thing for me that I'm still working my way through. But I had basically drunk 10 years of my children's lives away. And so I was present. I was there. They if you ask them, they'll tell you that I was a good mom and I, showed up for them to the best of my ability. But when you spend that many years waiting for them to go to bed so you can start drinking, I know that. I may not have exhibited that in an outward way, but I know what I was doing, and that is awful. It's awful to think about. So not only was I now vulnerable, asking for help, but I was also dealing with so much shame. Um, and what helped me to combat that was asking for forgiveness. And so I did. I walked through that process of, telling my family I was so, so sorry and asking, them to forgive me. Um, and so that was a very raw and difficult thing to do as well. But I was met with so much grace. It was really, really incredible. So I don't think I answered your question there, Annie, and I apologize.
No, I think it was good. I just want to say, I think you have so much courage for showing up today, because this is a story you don't have to tell, but I guarantee there are people listening that are like, that's me. I need to start to do this. I need to start to look at these resources, to let some walls down, to ask for help. So I just, one, I want to tell you how brave you are. And then two, it just, like the scripture of God uses all things for good. Like, I'm sure in the midst of all of this, it didn't seem like it, but you being a light to other people now, I feel like definitely he is using all things for good.
That's absolutely true, and that is why I'm sharing. I'm not a professional. I have nothing to sell here. I'm not a coach. I'm not an anything. I'm just a mom and a professional now. That's weird. In the, professional world, that has a story and had an experience. And I do think other people need to hear it. Especially people who don't have a low bottom. And what I mean by that is a lot of times you'll hear stories about people who abuse alcohol or drugs or whatever, and they've got the low bottom stories. I was in the gutter. I, drove my kids to school drunk and got arrested. I, just all sorts of awful, awful, awful substance abuse stories. And I don't have any of those. I have some embarrassing moments, but I don't have any low bottom stories. And so I think sometimes people can think, well, I haven't done any of that stuff, so it must not be so bad. But let me tell you something. If you think you have a problem, you do. And so if you think it's something you want to change in your life, and this goes for anything, this goes for eating sugar or, watching things you shouldn't be watching or listening to things you shouldn't be listening to. Um, Anything you're entertaining in your life that is starting to take over, you think about it more than you want to think about it. It's something that's starting to become problematic in your life. It is something you need to probably flesh out. And the tools that we use in sobriety are tools that can be used across all of these things. Um, and it is so important for people to know you don't have to have a low bottom in whatever your challenge or your struggle is in order to want to make a change and do a little bit better. One of the things I love, Annie, in your podcast is when you start, one of the things in your intro is who is the person you're being? And I love that question. I love that question. I've even learned in my life now to take a step back when I'm in a difficult situation. or I'm confronted with difficulty, because Lord, don't we all have difficulty coming our way? We get bad news, we get difficult news,
Yeah.
we experience a betrayal, whatever happens, to take a step back and say, who do I want to be in my story? Who am I going to be in this story? Who is the person that I'm being? Like you put it. And that's such an important question. And if you are in your, going through the day to day of your life, but you step back a little bit and you say, am I representing who I want to be in this story of my life? If the answer is no, let's work on it. We got the whole rest of our lives, right? To keep learning and growing. It's a journey. It's not all about the destination. And so if you do experience that, you say, "Hey, I'm not really being who I want to be in my story." It's okay to make a change, even if no one else thinks you need to make a change. Just like my family was like, "No, Laura, you don't have a drinking problem. You're fine." I knew I wasn't fine, and I knew I had to make a change. And so I embarked on this journey terrified, but knowing something had to give. And so I would definitely encourage others to, take a hard look and make, some of those core decisions, even if nobody else thinks it's an issue. If you think it is, it's time to do something.
I think that's great advice because you're the one looking in the mirror and you know that person. That was me for a lot of years. Everything looked great on the outside,
Mm.
but I knew, but I wasn't being the person that I would be proud of when I looked in the mirror. And it started this journey for me. And it never ends. You deal with one thing and something else comes up, or you're like, I can be better in that. So it is this journey. And you're right. We have the rest of our lives. So we might as well embark on it instead of just staying stuck, that really believing there is a better path. And like you said, you didn't it took some of the joy, but the joy that you felt when you dealt with it, I love that because I think we're always so scared to give something up, but we never really think about what's on the other side of that. What is that joy?
Yeah, you could not be more right. For so many years, I couldn't imagine experiencing joy without drinking because I thought it helps me relax. I thought it enhanced the experiences that I was having. I could not have been more wrong. It was robbing me of joy, and creating so many more complications on top of that. And so I was amazed the first time I went to a wedding and I didn't drink. I thought, I'm still having fun here. I'm dancing. I'm talking. This is great. And I have no regrets the next day. I am here to tell you there are nights still to this day when I think, man, it would be nice to have a drink when I get home. But I have never woken up in the morning and thought, man, I'm glad I drank last night. Never one time. Sober mornings are the most glorious things you can ever imagine. You are clear headed, clear eyed, not wondering what you posted on Facebook last night, not wondering who you texted last night, not wondering what stupid thing you said or did, not just it's the most clear feeling. And to be able to go out into the world and experience it with this clear conscience and this clear head is more joy than my best drunk night. Um, and it's been transformative. And you can't know that until you eliminate it. That's the other thing I think that a lot of people get stuck on sometimes is they're like, okay, well, I know I have a problem with drinking or whatever else it is. And if I can just get my stuff together, then I'll quit drinking. I'm gonna deal with my childhood trauma and then I'll quit drinking. I'm gonna divorce this guy and find a better one, and then I'll quit drinking. And I cannot stress to you enough, and this is something that Belle says, you gotta eliminate the alcohol first. I promise you, everything else is easier once you eliminate that thing because you do start to really experience yourself, and you do find these spontaneous joys, and you start to have hope for the future. That's the other thing, Annie, that I love that you talk about is hope for the future. The next thing, believing that even if today's not as good as it can be, tomorrow's coming and it's gonna get better. And that is something that I really was not experiencing in my drinking days.
Yeah. Because when you're in it, it's hard to have that hope. It's hard to see past that day that there will be hope for a better future, but there is. There always is. Like we get to write that path forward. We can't control our circumstances, but we control those choices. And and I love that because you did that so well. The other thing I think that comes up is, you said a lot of times you were hiding this, or like because there was that essence of shame involved. And I think once we start to do something in secret, that kind of has something over us because we don't want other people to know. What if they knew? Would they be my friend? Would they leave? All the what ifs. And so we hide. And I think when we do that, we hide ourselves and we hide our joy.
So true. It's so true. Um, it's so much more fun, and it does bring so much more joy to live freely. One of the things that Belle says is that booze is an elevator that goes only down. So get off, just get off. It's amazing what happens when you just exit and go into the new life that's available for you. And it can be terrifying. You may get rejected. I did have some difficulty when I first quit drinking. Um, it there were some places I couldn't go anymore, at least at that time. I didn't wanna go to a bar. I didn't wanna go certain places, and I that alienated me from certain people in my life, which broke my heart. But I knew I had to do it, at least in those beginning stages, in order to protect my sobriety. And I think this is something else I wanna say. Along with avoiding overwhelm when you first quit doing anything that's not serving you well, um, one of the things that Belle will tell you is don't try to lose weight the first year. When I got sober, of course, I was, like suddenly starting to realize that I was not as healthy as I wanted to be. I had 4 little kids. I had an amazing husband. I wanted to be around for them, not just in a weight loss sense, but also just in an overall health sense. I knew I had spent the last 10 years damaging my body horrifically. And so I wanted to get better, but and one of the things I think that people will do is they're like, "I'm gonna lose weight and I'm gonna go on a diet and I'm gonna get so healthy and it's gonna be so great," while they're in their infant stages of sobriety. And so Belle will tell you, "Don't try to lose weight the first year." And I was very desperate to be successful in my sobriety, and so I listened to her, shockingly. Listened to her, and I did not try to lose weight the first year. I did whatever I could do just to not drink today. That was the goal. But I had been sober almost a year. It was August of 2019, and I knew I kinda wanted to start doing something, but I wasn't sure what that thing was gonna be. And I had driven by Orange Theory, and I just thought to myself, "I don't know what goes on in there, but I think I need to go in there. Like, I think whatever's happening in that building is for me." I don't know why I thought that, had no idea. So I called, got on the phone with Orange Theory, was like, "Hello, can I come do whatever it is that all of you all do in there sometime?" And they were like, "Yes, you can." So I went to my very first Orange Theory class, had no idea what to expect. I am telling when I am here to tell you I knew nothing. So I walked in there and I was like, "Oh, rowers. Oh, treadmills. Oh, weights. Oh," like I was woo! I'd never done anything like that before, but I just felt like I was supposed to be in there. So I did my first class. Connie coached me. God bless her. I love that woman. And I knew I had found the place that I was supposed to be. And what was so fun about that time is it really was not then at that point for me about how I looked or losing weight. It was just about trying to get healthy, trying to be the healthiest me that I could be. And I knew that moving my body would help me with that. And so I started Orange Theory, and it has been one of the most joyous, wonderful things in my whole life. I'm so grateful for it. I have gone through a lot of seasons with OTF. I've injured myself and had to, take time off and stuff, but it's something that I have been doing consistently, except for time off for injuries, since 2019, and it's my home away from home. I love it so much. It's such a positive environment. And so I do think, people talk about like, "Oh, you're replacing one addiction for another." Yeah, probably. But when it's as wonderful as Orange Theory is, I don't have to feel bad about it. It's not something that produces shame. It's not something I have to hide under the covers. Um, and so it's just been a wonderful addition to my life.
That's great. And we love having you there as a member. You light up the room when you come. And I love that you took something that wasn't healthy for you and you replaced it with something that was. And I love that because it shows us that it's possible.
Yes.
And I'm guessing for a lot of years, you didn't think that was possible.
Nope. I
Yeah.
sure didn't. I sure didn't. Um, I never thought I could be doing what I'm doing today and where I am today. But for the grace of God and doing it scared, doing the hard things scared. Um, and it's amazing what happens when you keep going. You just keep going.
Yeah. One foot in front of the other. I think we show up. And in your story, I'm so grateful that you're telling it because I think other people relate. Nobody relates to perfect. Nobody relates to like, I don't have any issues. We all have issues and we all have different mechanisms to deal with them. So I love that you took yours and you just switched to something healthy because it shows other people they can do the same. They really can. That we all have, these choices. But any advice that you would give somebody's listening and they were where you were, maybe I'll link to all the resources you have too, but maybe just some like, okay, do this today.
Um, I would I would definitely suggest that when you come to that sort of ground zero where you're like, this is a problem, I have to do something about it. If you're able to tell one person you trust, you don't have to tell a lot of people. Kind of a bad idea, really, to, to vomit it all over people, especially if they're not safe. But if you can find one person you trust and say, whether you think I have a problem with this thing or not, I think I have a problem with this thing, and I'm going to do something about it today. Inviting one person in, bringing them into the light with you. The Bible says that when you walk in the light, as He is in the light, you have fellowship. And so bring someone into fellowship with you that can walk alongside you and support you, whether it's an issue they've ever struggled with or not. Just somebody that can support you along the way. And then look for the resources that work for you. I tried once with one resource and it didn't resonate with me. So I kept looking and I kept trying the next thing. And so I think that would be a really important piece of advice. If you find one thing and you're like, well, I just can't get sober because AA didn't work for me, or I don't like Belle's emails, God forbid, the person that helped me the most didn't work for you. That's okay. Keep looking, do the next thing, and keep looking for that support. And then layer supports. That's the other thing that was like huge, huge for me. Is to layer my supports up. I was, getting Belle's daily emails. I was replying to Belle's daily emails. I was listening to sober audios. I was, reading sober books. I was talking to sober people. Like I was just layering it in. I was getting myself sober treats. Cannot overemphasize the benefit of a sober treat. I am buying myself flowers today because I'm sober and that's hard. And so layering in support is something that was really life changing for me and will help others as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And the thing that you said was you did it scared. And I think that's a lot of times people think it's not going to be scary or it's going to be easy. And anything, I would say the same as you, anything hard that I've ever done, open OTF, start this podcast, I did it scared. And you can put on the face on the outside to look like you're not, but I guarantee every single person that's doing something big does it scared for quite a while.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I so admire what you and Jeff have done with the Orange Theories in town. They are amazing, but I'm sure that that was terrifying. And like you said, starting the podcast, putting yourself out there, I can't imagine what that was like, but it's benefiting so many people. And I think that's the other thing that helps us keep going is when we know that even if one person is benefited, it's worth the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It was scarier, but there's been more joy than I could ever imagine, kind of like what you said earlier. Lauren, you have been just so amazing. I just love you. Um,
I love
I
you
think
too.
other people will want to connect, will resonate so much with you. And I'll link this in the show notes, but what's the best way to connect with you?
Come to OTF with me. I'm usually there 6:15, 7:30 at the Stetson Hills location. Come work out with me. But seriously, if you do want to connect, I would be happy to share my email address. I don't have a website or anything like that, but I would be more than happy to email back and forth with anybody who, wants to, ask any more questions or wants to get connected to resources. I'm always happy to set somebody off in the right direction. I'm certainly not an expert. I'm not a medical professional, nothing like that. But I know what I know and I've been where I've been. And so I'd be happy to share that. via email. Sure.
Okay. I'll put that in our show notes. And just thank you for your courage and your time to be on here today. I appreciate you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share. It was a pleasure and an honor. I just so admire and respect you, Annie. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining Be the Person podcast. If there's somebody that you think might be struggling with addiction or that you think would benefit from hearing this, I would just invite you to share this episode with them because it could be the one thing they need to make a change. Thanks for joining.